You know that prickly feeling when you are the only one being watched in a crowded terminal? I thought I was just fighting the clock to make a probate hearing by 9 in the morning, but when that officer stepped in my path, I realized this was not about time. My parents did not just want me late, they called in a threat to make sure I looked too dangerous to inherit a single dime. My name is Isla James, and at 34 years old, standing in the fluorescent purgatory of Terminal B, I felt less like a grieving granddaughter and more like a fugitive running out of time. I shoved my boots into the gray plastic bin, the rubber soles thumping against the hard surface with a sound that seemed aggressively loud in my own ears. I kept my eyes fixed on the analog clock mounted on the far wall, watching the second hand sweep past the 6. It was 6:45 in the morning. My flight was scheduled to board at 7:15. The probate hearing, the reason my entire life felt suspended in a terrifying sort of stasis, was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp at the Harlan Creek County Probate Court. 300 miles away, this was not a vacation. This was a summoning. Today was the day the court would finally put names to assets, deciding who walked away with a legacy and who walked away with nothing but legal fees. It was the day the ghost of my grandfather would be distilled into paperwork, deeds, and bank accounts. And if I missed that flight, if I was not standing in that courtroom when the gavel came down, the narrative would be written without me. I pushed the bin onto the conveyor belt. My laptop bag followed. Then my coat. I felt stripped, not just of my outer layers, but of my defenses. For the last 3 days, my phone had been a battlefield. My mother's voice had filled my voicemail box, her tone shifting from cloying concern to sharp aggression. "Let us handle it, Isla," she had said, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was lying. "You are too emotional right now. You will just confuse the judge. Stay home. We will call you when it is done." They did not want me there. That much was obvious. But it was the specific phrasing that stuck in my throat like a fishbone. "You will just confuse things." It was the same language they had used when I was 12 and wanted to ask why money was missing from my savings account. It was the same language they used when I was 22 and asked why my college fund had evaporated. They treated reality like a clay sculpture they could reshape if they just pressed hard enough. And they treated me like the one person clumsy enough to knock it over. I stepped toward the body scanner. The air in the security checkpoint was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the collective anxiety of 500 people trying to get somewhere else. I raised my hands above my head, assuming the position of surrender that modern travel demanded. The machine whirred around me. A brief, invasive hum. I stepped out, reaching for the air, ready to grab my bin, lace up my boots, and sprint to gate C4. I was already calculating the timeline in my head. If we landed at 8:30, and I had a rental car reserved, I could make it to the courthouse by 8:55. It was tight. It was reckless, but it was possible. "Ma'am," the voice was not loud, but it cut through the din of the terminal like a knife through heavy curtains. It was a flat baritone sound, devoid of any customer service lilt. I froze, one hand hovering over my plastic bin. I looked up. A Transportation Security Administration officer was standing directly in my path. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, wearing blue latex gloves, but it was not him that made my stomach drop. It was the man standing just behind him. A police officer, airport police. His uniform was crisp, his stance wide, his hand resting casually near his belt, not on his weapon, but close enough to signal readiness. "Ma'am," the police officer repeated, stepping around the TSA agent. "Please step aside. Do not touch your belongings." The rhythm of the security line shattered. You know how it is in an airport. Everyone is in their own bubble, rushing, checking phones, ignoring their neighbors, but the moment authority asserts itself, the moment the flow is blocked, the bubble pops. The silence that fell over the people behind me was instant and heavy. It was the silence of relief. Thank God it is not me, mixed with morbid curiosity. "I have a flight," I said. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I cleared my throat and tried again, channeling the version of myself that did not let my parents dictate reality. I have a flight to catch in 30 minutes. Is there a problem with my bag? I looked at the monitor. Had I left a water bottle? A rogue bottle of shampoo larger than 3.4 ounces? The officer did not look at the monitor. He looked at me. His eyes were scanning my face, checking it against something he knew, something I did not. "Ma'am, come with us," he said. It was not a question. It was a command wrapped in the thinnest possible layer of politeness. "Is this a random check?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Because I really cannot miss this flight. I have a court hearing at 9 o'clock. "Bring your personal items," the officer said to the TSA agent. Ignoring my question entirely, "We will take them to the secondary screening room." "Wait," I said, stepping back as the TSA agent grabbed my bin. That bin held my laptop, my notes for the hearing, the original copy of the EMS dispatch log I had retrieved from the Emergency Services archives. "That is my property. You cannot just take it." "We are not taking it. Ms. James," the officer said. He used my name. I had not given him my ID yet. The blood drained from my face. The temperature in the terminal seemed to drop 10 degrees. He knew who I was. This was not random. "Walk with me," he said. He gestured toward a nondescript door past the metal detectors. A door most people walked past 1,000 times without seeing. I felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on my back. I could feel their judgment. To them, I was a criminal. I was someone who had tried to smuggle something, or someone who was on a list. I was the disruption in their morning. I kept my head high, fighting the urge to shrink, to apologize, to make myself small. That was what my mother would want. Be small. Isla. Be quiet. Isla. Let us handle the big, scary world. I walked. The officer stayed 2 steps behind me, close enough to grab my arm if I bolted, far enough to maintain a tactical gap. We passed through the beige door and the noise of the terminal, the rolling wheels, the announcements, the crying babies, vanished, replaced by the heavy, pressurized silence of a secure facility. The glass door clicked shut, sealing out the hum of the terminal and leaving me in a vacuum of pressurized silence. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale adrenaline. I sat in the metal chair, planting my feet flat on the linoleum, feeling the cold steel press against my spine. This was the test. I knew it immediately. This was not just a security screening. It was a psychological audit. If I raised my voice, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was unstable. If I argued too logically, I was defensive. The only winning move was a terrifying, unnatural stillness. I folded my hands on the table, interlacing my fingers so tightly the knuckles turned white, and looked at the officer across from me. "Who reported this?" I asked. My voice was low, stripped of any inflection. The officer did not answer immediately. He stood with his hip leaning against the edge of the table, holding his tablet like a shield. He swiped a finger across the screen, his eyes darting back and forth as he read a block of text that I could not see. He was letting the silence do the heavy lifting, waiting for me to fill the dead air with nervous chatter or incriminating excuses. "We have a statement here," he said finally, avoiding my question. He looked up, his gaze locking onto mine with a practiced intensity. "The report details a specific concern about your volatility. It quotes you as saying you intended to, and I am quoting here, make them pay for what they have done, and suggests a high probability of you causing a scene in a confined public space." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Make them pay. The phrase landed in the center of the room like a dead weight. It was so theatrical, so melodramatic, and it was so undeniably, specifically familiar. It was the kind of language that sounded terrifying to a stranger, but meant absolutely nothing in the context of my life, except to identify the author. I did not use phrases like that. I was an accountant by trade. I spoke in ledgers, in deficits, in concrete realities, but my father, Douglas James, spoke in headlines. He spoke in vague, ominous threats that sounded good on a recording but fell apart under cross-examination. Make them pay was his favorite projection. It was what he was terrified I would do to him. So naturally, it was what he accused me of planning to do to others. I felt the urge to scream, to stand up and shout that this was a farce, but I swallowed it down. I forced my breathing to slow. In for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. That is a very specific choice of words, I said. I kept my eyes on the officer, refusing to blink. It is also a lie. I have never said that. I have not spoken to the person who called you in over 6 months. The officer raised an eyebrow. You know who called it in? I know the genre, I said. And I know the timing. I gestured to the clock on the wall. It was now 7:10 in the morning. I am traveling to Harlan Creek County for a probate hearing, I continued, keeping my tone clinical. My grandfather died 3 weeks ago. Today, at 9 in the morning, a judge is deciding the distribution of an estate valued at over $2 million. If I am not in that courtroom, the people who reported me to you will be granted temporary control of those assets. I saw the shift. It was subtle, but it was there. There was a second officer in the room, a woman standing by the door. She had been silent until now, her arms crossed, watching me with the detached scrutiny of someone who had seen every variety of airport meltdown. But when I mentioned the probate hearing and the $2 million, her posture changed. She uncrossed her arms. She glanced at the clock, then at me. She had seen this before. Every police officer eventually sees it. The weaponization of the 911 system for civil leverage, divorce proceedings, custody battles, inheritance disputes, drama disguised as public safety concerns. You are claiming this is a civil dispute? The male officer asked, his tone skeptical but less aggressive than before. I am claiming that I am the only obstacle between my parents and a significant amount of money, I said. And I am claiming that the person who called you knows exactly what time my flight leaves and exactly what time the court opens. This was not a call to save lives. Officer, this was a call to kill time. The male officer looked back at his tablet. He was wavering. The threat was severe enough that he could not ignore it. But my demeanor was wrong. I was not pacing. I was not sweating. I was outlining a motive with the precision of a prosecutor. The report mentions a risk of self-harm, he said, trying to regain the upper hand. It says you have a history of episodes. I have a credit score of 750 and a job I have held for 8 years, I said flatly. I do not have episodes. I have a family that lies. I leaned forward slightly, just an inch, entering his personal space. I want to see the proof, I said. You are holding me based on a report. Show me the call log. Show me the transcript. I want to see the name of the person who called. I do not want the summary you are reading. I want the metadata. The officer hesitated. That is confidential information during an active investigation. It is not an investigation, I countered. It is a delay tactic. And if you are going to make me miss a court date that determines the fate of a family trust, you need to be absolutely certain that the person on the other end of that phone line is a credible witness and not an interested party in the lawsuit I am trying to attend. The room fell silent again. The female officer cleared her throat. Check it, Steve, she said softly. The male officer looked at her. Check the reporting party, she repeated. She tapped her own wrist, signaling the time. If she is right, and we hold her here for a vindictive ex or a greedy relative, and she misses a court date involving 7 figures, the liability does not look good for us. She was smart. She knew that abundance of caution was a good defense until it turned into aiding and abetting fraud. The male officer sighed. He was frustrated. He wanted a clear-cut bad guy, not a family tragedy. He tapped the screen of his tablet, exiting the summary view and navigating into the deeper fields of the incident report. I watched his fingers slide across the glass. I watched his eyes scan the lines of data, and then I watched him freeze. It was a physical reaction. His finger stopped mid-swipe. His eyebrows pulled together. He leaned closer to the screen as if he had misread the text. He blinked. Once, twice, The air in the room seemed to vibrate. The power dynamic had just inverted. He was no longer the hunter. He was the one realizing he had stepped into a trap set by someone else. He looked up at me. His face was unreadable, but the aggression was gone. In its place was a complicated mix of confusion and realization. "The name," I said. I did not make it a question. He looked at the female officer, then back at me. He took a breath. "The reporting party," he said, his voice lacking the authority it had carried 2 minutes ago. He looked down at the screen again, reading the words as if they were a foreign language. "Douglas James," he paused, letting the name hang there. "Relationship to subject," he continued, reading the next field. "Father." I did not smile. I did not say I told you so. I just nodded. A slow, grim acknowledgement of the reality I had known the moment I walked into the room. "He called 3 times, didn't he?" I asked. The officer looked back at the log. "Yes, 2 incomplete calls, 1 connected." "He was rehearsing," I said. He had to get the tone right. Concerned father, not angry litigant. If he sounded too angry, you would have dismissed it as a domestic squabble. He had to sound scared. He had to sound like he was trying to save me from myself. I looked at the tablet in his hands. "He lied to a federal officer to manipulate a judicial outcome," I said. "And right now, he is winning." The officer lowered the tablet. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the exhaustion in my eyes, yes, but he also saw the iron will holding it back. He saw the daughter who had been playing this game for 34 years. "He said you were carrying documents," the officer said, his voice quiet. "He said you might try to destroy them if confronted. That is why we had to secure your bag." "I am carrying documents," I confirmed. "I am carrying the emergency medical services dispatch log from the night my grandfather died. It proves that my father was not in the room when the will was discussed. Despite what he claims in his affidavit, he does not want me to destroy them. Officer, he wants you to confiscate them. He wants to separate me from the only evidence that proves he is lying." The female officer stepped forward. "Open the bag, Steve." "But the protocol," he started. "Open the bag," she said firmly. "Search it. Clear it. Get her out of here." She looked at me with a gaze that was almost apologetic. "If she misses that flight," she said to her partner, "we are doing exactly what the caller wanted." The male officer placed the tablet on the table. The screen was still glowing. The name Douglas James shining in strict digital font. It was the only truth in the entire report. "Stand up, please," the officer said. I stood. My legs were trembling, but I locked my knees. "I need to check your person," he said. Arms out, I raised my arms. As he patted down the sides of my jacket, checking for weapons I did not own, I stared at the glass wall. Outside, people were rushing to their gates. They were worrying about overhead bin space and upgraded seats. They had no idea that in a small room 10 feet away, a war was being fought with paper trails and police codes. My father had played a strong card. He had used the system's own immune response against me. He knew that the words threat and airport combined to create a paralysis that logic could not penetrate. He had counted on me getting angry. He had counted on me screaming, but he had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten that I grew up in his house. I had spent 3 decades learning how to navigate a minefield without setting off the explosives. "Clear," the officer said, stepping back. He turned to my bag on the side table. He unzipped the main compartment. I held my breath as his gloved hands hovered over the blue folder containing the medical logs. If he took them, if he tagged them as evidence. He lifted the folder. He opened it. He saw the rows of timestamps, the medical codes, the dispatch notes. It was boring. Bureaucratic paper. It was not a manifesto. It was not a weapon. He closed the folder and placed it back in the bag. "Clear," he said again. He looked at me. "You are free to go, Ms. James." I grabbed my bag before he could change his mind. I slung it over my shoulder. The the weight of it reassuring against my side. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "I need that incident number. When I get to court, my father is going to tell the judge I was detained because I was dangerous. I need a record that says I was released because I was innocent." The officer nodded. He tapped the screen and a small printer on the desk whirred to life. He tore off a slip of thermal paper and handed it to me. "Incident number 4922, he said. "Subject cleared. No threat detected." I took the paper. It was flimsy, barely longer than a receipt for a sandwich, but it was the first weapon I had in my arsenal. "Thank you," I said. I pushed open the door and stepped out of the vacuum. The noise of the terminal rushed back in, a chaotic symphony of announcements and footsteps. I checked my watch. 7:20. I had missed boarding, but the plane might still be at the gate. If I ran, if I pushed, if luck was on my side for the first time in a month, I might still make it. I tightened my grip on the bag and took off, my boots hammering against the floor, running toward the gate, running toward the truth, running toward a fight that had only just begun. The atmosphere in the interrogation room underwent a complete chemical change. It was no longer the sterile, pressurized environment of a security screening. It felt suddenly like a back room in a precinct where the detectives realize they have been chasing the wrong lead. The hostility that had been directed at me just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. It was the specific kind of silence that occurs when a bureaucratic system realizes it has been weaponized by an outsider. The officer, whose badge read Miller, did not apologize. Police officers rarely do. Instead, he sat down in the metal chair opposite me, the legs scraping harsh and loud against the linoleum floor. He placed the tablet flat on the table between us, treating it less like a piece of technology and more like a piece of evidence that had just contaminated his crime scene. "This is not a security issue," Miller said, his voice dropping to a register that was almost conspiratorial. "This is a domestic manipulation using federal resources." He tapped the screen with a heavy finger, bringing up a media file embedded in the report. "I am going to play the recording of the initial call," he said. "I need you to confirm if this is the voice of Douglas James." He pressed play. The sound that filled the small glass room was tinny, filtered through the compression of the recording software, but the cadence was unmistakable. I am calling because I am worried," the voice said. It was smooth, cultured, with that slight tremble at the end of sentences that my father used to denote reluctant vulnerability. "My daughter, Isla, she is not well. She has been erratic. I am afraid for the people around her." Hearing his voice in that sterile room made my stomach turn. It was a visceral reaction, a physical rejection of his frequency, but I forced myself to listen, to analyze it not as a daughter, but as a defendant listening to a prosecutor. "She is getting on a flight today," the voice continued. "And with the probate hearing coming up, the stress, she made comments. She said she would make them pay. I just want everyone to be safe." I looked at Officer Miller. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just nodded once, slowly. "That is him," I said. And notice how he slipped the words probate hearing in there? He could not help himself. He had to establish the context for the judge later. "He is not talking to you, officer. He is talking to the court transcript that he hopes this recording will become." Miller nodded. He swiped to a different tab on the screen. "We looked at the call metadata," he said. "This was not a panic dial. He called 3 times. I leaned in, looking at the timestamps he pointed to. "Call 1, Miller read. "Duration, 4 seconds. Terminated by caller before connection. Call 2, duration, 12 seconds. Terminated by caller during the automated menu. Call 3, connected. Duration, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He was rehearsing, I said, the realization chilling me. He hung up the first 2 times because he did not feel ready. He needed to get into character. He needed to make sure his breathing sounded shallow enough to simulate fear. "It looks like a script," Miller agreed. "People in genuine crisis do not hang up and redial to get the opening line right. They scream. They ramble. This is a performance. He pushed a piece of paper and a pen across the table toward me. It was a form titled Voluntary Statement. I need you to write down exactly what you told me, Miller said. State clearly that you believe this report was filed falsely by Douglas James for the express purpose of obstructing your attendance at a court hearing. Use those words, obstructing a court hearing. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady, fueled by a cold, sharp clarity. I wrote quickly, the ink flowing over the paper as I codified the truth. I, Isla James, am being detained based on a malicious and false report filed by my father, Douglas James, a counterparty in the estate of William H. Ridgewell. The objective of this report is to prevent my appearance at the probate court of Harlan Creek County. I signed it and pushed it back. Miller took the paper, reviewed it, and then looked at me with a renewed seriousness. There is one more thing, he said. And this is the part that worries me the most. This is the part that makes me think he has done this before. He scrolled to the bottom of the incident report, to a section labeled Officer Safety Notes / Additional Remarks. The caller added a specific addendum after the main report was filed. Miller said, he stated, subject is likely carrying documents she claims are legal papers, but she has expressed an intent to destroy them if confronted. These papers are evidence of her instability. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a trap within a trap. He wants you to take them, I whispered. He does not just want me delayed. He wants me stripped. If I had reacted defensively when they asked to search my bag earlier, if I had clutched the papers to my chest, I would have fulfilled his prophecy. I would have looked like I was trying to hide evidence of instability, but if I handed them over, and the police seized them as part of the investigation into my threat, they would be tagged and locked in an evidence locker for 48 hours, long enough for the hearing to end, long enough for the estate to be signed over. He knows exactly what is in my bag, I said, looking Miller in the eye. He is terrified of those papers. What are they? Miller asked. And do not tell me they are just legal papers. I need to know why a man would risk a felony false report charge to get them away from you. They are the EMS and dispatch logs from the night of January 12th, I said. The night my grandfather died, I reached for my bag. Moving slowly so as not to startle the other officer in the room, I pulled out the blue folder. My father's entire claim to the estate rests on an affidavit where he swears he was by my grandfather's side at 7 p.m, receiving his final oral instructions regarding the will, I explained, opening the folder. He claims they had a lucid conversation where my grandfather cut me out. I turned the folder around so Miller could see the document. It was a dense grid of codes, times, and notes. This is the dispatch log from that night, I said, pointing to a line near the bottom. Look at the timestamp for the ambulance arrival, 7:15 p.m. Now look at the on-scene notes recorded by the paramedics. Miller leaned in, squinting at the small print. Patient unconscious upon arrival, he read. Witnesses present. Sarah Miller, home health aide. My father is not listed, I said. He was not there. The logs show that the only people in the house were the aide and my grandfather, who had been unconscious since 5 p.m. My father did not arrive until 8:30, well after the ambulance had left. He lied in his affidavit, and he knows that if I walk into court with this piece of paper, he is not just losing the money, he is going to jail for perjury. Miller looked from the paper to me. The pieces fell into place. The instability claim, the threat to the aircraft, the destroying papers warning, it was all a firewall designed to burn this single blue folder before it could reach the judge. He tried to use us to sanitize the crime scene, Miller said, his voice hard. He stood up and walked over to a small printer in the corner of the room. He punched a few keys, and the machine whirred. Spitting out a slip of paper, he handed it to me. This is your incident number, he said. Incident number 4922. I have updated the file. It now lists the status as unfounded and the reporting party as suspected malicious actor. He looked at me with an expression that was almost apologetic. "If you get to court," he said, "and they try to say you were detained because you were dangerous, you show them this. This piece of paper says the police department believes you are the victim, not the suspect." I took the slip. It was light, flimsy thermal paper, but it felt heavier than gold. "Thank you," I said. "Do not thank me yet," Miller said, glancing at the clock. "You have been in here for 40 minutes. Your flight." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I grabbed my bag, shoving the blue folder deep inside, right next to the incident slip. I stood up, my legs feeling like compressed springs ready to snap. "I have to go," I said. "Go," Miller said. "And Ms. James?" I paused at the door. "Make him pay," Miller said. But this time, it wasn't a threat, it was an instruction. I stepped out of the room, leaving the glass box behind, but carrying the ammunition I needed. The airport terminal was bright and loud, a stark contrast to the quiet revelation that had just occurred. I had the truth. I had the proof. But as I looked at the departure screens, a new sinking feeling took hold. The battle in the room was won, but the war against the clock, and the systems my father could manipulate from afar, was far from over. I started to run, but deep down, I knew that Douglas James had not put all his faith in a single phone call to the police. There would be more. There was always more. Officer Miller did not just open the door and wave goodbye. He understood the optics of the situation better than I did. If I had burst out of that interrogation room alone, sprinting through the terminal with my hair messy and my eyes wide, I would have looked exactly like the unstable woman my father had described in his report. I would have drawn attention. I might have even triggered another security alert. So, Miller walked me out. He walked me past the curious eyes of the other passengers, past the TSA agents who had stripped my bag, and all the way back to the secure side of the checkpoint. He walked with a deliberate, official pace that signaled to everyone watching that I was not a suspect fleeing custody, but a citizen being assisted. It was a small mercy, but in the ecosystem of an airport where perception is reality, it was significant. "Go," Miller said simply when we reached the concourse. He gave a curt nod. Turning back to his domain of glass and suspicion, I did not waste a second. I hoisted my bag onto my shoulder, feeling the reassuring weight of the blue folder and the police incident slip inside, and I started to move. I did not run with the frantic, flailing energy of panic. I ran with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. I wove through the sluggish morning crowd, calculating gaps between rolling suitcases and slow-moving families. My gate was C4. I was currently at B9. I had perhaps 8 minutes before the doors closed. My boots hit the terrazzo floor in a rhythmic thudding. My breath came in steady. Measured pulls, left at the food court, straight past the duty-free shop, dodged the cleaning cart, and then my phone buzzed. It was a single, sharp vibration against my palm. I almost ignored it. I assumed it was a calendar reminder for the hearing I was fighting to reach, or maybe a text from my lawyer asking where I was. But instinct, honed by a morning of disasters, made me look. I slowed my pace just enough to focus on the screen. It was an email notification from the airline. The header was bright red, flight status update. I tapped it, my thumb slipping on the glass because my hands were sweating. The message opened, and the words that stared back at me were so absurd, so infuriating, that I actually stopped moving. I stood dead still in the middle of the moving walkway, letting the rubber belt carry me forward while my world collapsed backward. "Your reservation has been canceled." I read the next line, the reason code. Reason: canceled per customer request. The air left my lungs. It was not a weather delay. It was not a mechanical failure. It was not a crew shortage. It was a customer request. I stared at the phone. I was the customer. I was the only person with the login. I was the only person who should have been able to authorize a change. And yet, while I had been sitting in a glass box proving my sanity to the police, someone had logged into the system and erased my seat. I did not scream. The anger that flooded my veins was too cold for screaming. It was a clarifying freeze. This was the second layer. My father knew the police report might not hold. He knew I might talk my way out of it because I was smart and I had evidence. So he had built a redundancy. He had attacked the logistics. I looked up. The gate was still 500 yards away. But there was no point running to the gate anymore. I did not have a ticket. The gate agent would just look at me with pity and tell me I was not on the manifest. I stepped off the moving walkway and scanned the terminal. To my right, nestled between a newsstand and a currency exchange, was a customer service center. The line was 3 people deep. I did not wait. I bypassed the ropes. I bypassed the exhausted-looking man arguing about a voucher. I walked straight up to the counter where a female agent was typing furiously on her keyboard. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was tight, vibrating with the effort to sound sane. "Ma'am, the line starts back there," she said without looking up. "I do not have time for the line," I said. I slammed my driver's license onto the counter. "My flight was just canceled. The system says I requested it. I did not request it. I have been in police custody for the last 45 minutes. That got her attention. She stopped typing. She looked at the ID, then up at me. She saw the sheen of sweat on my forehead, the intensity in my eyes, and the sheer desperation radiating off me. "Name?" she asked, her tone shifting from dismissive to wary. "Isla James," I said. "Flight 402 to Harlan Creek. It was canceled 3 minutes ago." She picked up my ID and typed my name into her terminal. Her eyes scanned the screen. She frowned. She hit a few more keys, diving deeper into the reservation history. "I see the cancellation here," she said slowly. "It was processed at 7:18 in the morning. That was 12 minutes ago." "I was in a detention room at 7:18, I said. "I did not make that call." She looked at me, confused. "It was not a call, ma'am. It was done over the phone, but verified. The agent notes say the caller passed the security protocol." "Security protocol?" I laughed. A short, harsh sound. "What security protocol?" "The standard verification," she said, reciting the policy. "Confirmation number, date of birth, and the answer to the security question on file." I felt the blood drain from my face. The security question. It was such a standard feature of modern life that I had forgotten it was a vulnerability. "What is your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your first pet? What is the street you grew up on?" For most people, these questions keep hackers out. But for me, for anyone trying to escape a controlling family, these questions were not security. They were an open door. "Let me guess," I said, my voice trembling. The question was, "What is the name of your favorite elementary school teacher?" Or maybe, "What city were you born in?" The agent looked at the screen. It was, "What was the make of your first car?" I closed my eyes. A Honda Civic. My father had bought it for me. He knew the make. He knew the model. He knew the license plate number. He probably still had a key to it in his desk drawer. "The caller answered it correctly," the agent said, her voice sounding suspicious now. "So the system treated it as an authorized request." "The caller was my father," I said, opening my eyes. "He is the opposing party in a lawsuit I am flying to attend. He knows the answer to that question because he is the one who taught me to drive." The agent pulled back slightly. This was too much information. This was messy. Airline agents deal with lost bags, not lost families. "Ma'am, if the security questions were answered," she started, reaching for the bureaucratic shutdown phrase. I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out the thermal slip of paper Officer Miller had given me. Incident number 4922. I slid it across the counter, right next to my ID. "Read this," I commanded. She looked at the paper. Airport Police. Subject: Isla James. Incident type: Security threat investigation. Outcome: Unfounded. Reporting party: Douglas James, father. Notes: malicious report / obstruction. She read it twice. She looked at the timestamp on the slip. Released at 7:22. I was with the police when that call was made, I said. You can see the time. Unless I was telepathic, I did not cancel my own ticket while being interrogated for a threat he called in. The agent's face changed. The skepticism vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. She was looking at the mechanics of a trap. She was realizing that her airline had just been used as a tool in a personal war. He called the police on you? She whispered. He called the police to stop me, I said. When that didn't work, he called you. I leaned over the counter, lowering my voice. Look at the notes, I said. Not just the cancellation code. Look at the agent remarks. If he called, he didn't just say cancel. He said something else. He always says something else to justify it. The agent hesitated, then typed in a command to expand the call log notes. The screen filled with text. She read silently for a moment, and I saw her jaw tighten. What does it say? I asked. She turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to see everything, but enough to show she was breaking protocol to help me. Caller identified as Douglas James, she read. Stated he is the passenger's father. Claimed passenger is currently suffering from a severe mental health crisis and is not safe to travel alone. Requested cancellation of itinerary to prevent passenger from becoming stranded or causing self-harm. Refund waived in favor of future travel credit under his name. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was masterfully done. Refund waived. He didn't even want the money back. He just wanted the seat gone. He framed it as an act of desperate paternal protection. She isn't safe to travel alone. It sounded so caring. It sounded so responsible. He canceled it to save me, I said, my voice dripping with acid. That is the narrative. He put a flag on the reservation, the agent said, pointing to a red icon on the screen. Medical alert. Even if you had a ticket, the gate agent would have stopped you for a fitness to fly assessment. I stared at the screen. He had not just closed the door. He had nailed it shut. He had used the airline's liability fears against me. I need you to rebook me, I said. Right now, the next flight. The next direct flight is not until 2 p.m, she said gently. That is too late for your 9 o'clock hearing. There has to be something else, I said. A connection? A partner airline? She typed furiously. There is a flight on a partner carrier leaving in... She glanced at the clock. 40 minutes. It connects through Atlanta. It gets you into an airport 50 miles from Harlan Creek at 10:30. 10:30. The hearing started at 9. It was late. But maybe. Just maybe. If I called the court clerk. If I explained. Book it, I said. And I need you to do something else for me. What? She asked. I need a printout of that screen, I said, pointing to the monitor. I need the record that says Douglas James called. I need the record where he claims I am mentally unstable. I need the record where he transferred the credit to his name. I cannot give you internal notes, she said automatically. It is against privacy policy. He is using your airline to commit fraud, I said. He just impersonated me, or at least, he used my security answers to access my account without my consent. That is identity theft. If you do not give me that printout, I will have to subpoena this entire terminal record, and I will name you as the agent who saw the fraud and refused to document it. It was a threat, and I hated using it. I hated becoming like him, but I was desperate. The agent looked at the incident slip from the police again. She looked at my shaking hands. She made a decision. I can print a passenger activity report, she said, her voice low. It won't show the full system codes, but it will show the caller name and the reason for cancellation. Do it, I said. The printer chugged. She tore off the sheet and handed it to me. It was another piece of paper to add to my arsenal, another brick in the wall I was building against him. And one more thing, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I am changing your security settings. To what? I asked. I am placing a counter control lock on your profile, she explained. It means no changes can be made over the phone or online, no cancellations, no rebooking, no seat changes. The only way to touch this ticket is to stand right here, in front of a human being, with a government-issued ID. She looked me in the eye. He can call all he wants, she said. He can recite your mother's maiden name and your first car and your blood type. The system will just tell him to come to the airport. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was the first time in this entire nightmare that a system had actually worked in my favor. "Thank you," I whispered. "Here is your new boarding pass," she said, handing me the card. "Gate 12. It is in the other terminal. You have 35 minutes. You can make it, but you have to run." I took the pass. I took the printout. I took my ID. "I am running," I said. I turned away from the counter. My legs heavy, but my resolve harder than diamond. I had cleared the police. I had cleared the airline. I had 2 pieces of paper that proved my father was a liar. But as I sprinted toward the tram that would take me to Terminal A, I realized something. My father had fired 2 shots. 1 police report, 1 flight cancellation. He was a man who believed in the rule of 3. There was always a third act. I checked my watch. 7:40. The hearing was in 1 hour and 20 minutes. I was going to be late. The only question was whether there would still be a hearing to walk into by the time I arrived. I boarded the tram just as the doors hissed shut. Watching the terminal blur past me, I was moving again, but so was he. And I had a sickening feeling that his next move would not be at the airport. It would be at the courthouse. I collapsed into seat 24B, a middle seat in the back row of the economy cabin, my chest heaving as if I had just run a marathon, which, in a sense, I had. The cabin air was dry and smelled of recycled coffee and jet fuel. I jammed my bag under the seat in front of me, but I kept 2 pieces of paper clutched in my hand like holy scripture. One was the thermal slip from the airport police, incident number 4922, confirming that the threat against me was unfounded. The other was the passenger activity report from the airline, bearing the name of Douglas James and his fraudulent claim that I was mentally unfit to travel. These were not just scraps of paper anymore. They were the only shield I had left. I buckled my seatbelt, my fingers fumbling with the metal clasp. The flight attendant was already moving down the aisle, closing overhead bins with a rhythmic series of slams that sounded like gavel strikes. I checked my watch. It was 7:55 in the morning. We were pushing back from the gate, if this connection through Atlanta held. I would land 50 miles from Harlan Creek at 10:30. I would be late for the 9 o'clock hearing, but I could still burst into the courtroom before the final orders were signed. I could still shout, "Objection," from the back of the room, and then, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was not a text. It was an automated push notification from the Harlan Creek County Court electronic docket system. I had subscribed to case updates weeks ago, a small act of diligence that I had assumed would just remind me of filing deadlines. I unlocked the screen. The notification box was gray and unassuming, but the text inside stopped my heart. Case number H, C2024, Estate of William H. Ridgewell. Status update. Emergency motion granted. Hearing time amended. I tapped the notification, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone between the seats. The docket page loaded, the little spinning wheel mocking me for what felt like an eternity. When the text finally resolved, I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. Order on motion to expedite. Probate hearing rescheduled to 8:30 in the morning. 8:30. They had moved it up by 30 minutes. I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring. Why would they move it up? 30 minutes did not seem like much in the grand scheme of the legal system, which usually moved at the speed of a glacier, but then I looked at the filing code associated with the change. Motion to proceed. In absentia, due to beneficiary incapacity and detainment. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was not just a time change, it was the third strike. I closed my eyes, seeing the map of their strategy as clearly as if it were drawn on a whiteboard. Strike 1. The police report, that was designed to physically stop me at the airport and generate an official record of instability. Strike 2. The flight cancellation. That was the backup plan, designed to strand me if the police let me go, ensuring I physically could not travel. Strike 3. The court motion. This was the killing blow. They were using the first 2 strikes to tell the judge, "Look, she is not here. She is detained by the police for being dangerous. We need to proceed immediately to protect the assets." They moved the hearing to 8:30 because they knew I was originally scheduled to land at 8:30. They were closing the window before I could even touch the ground. They wanted the gavel to fall while I was still at 30,000 feet, helpless and silenced. "Ma'am, you need to put your phone in airplane mode," the flight attendant said, pausing by my row. Her voice was polite but firm. "1 minute," I pleaded, looking up at her. "Please, I have a family emergency. Just 1 minute." She hesitated, seeing the panic in my eyes. "The door is closed. We are active on the taxiway. You have 60 seconds. She walked away. 60 seconds. I did not call my lawyer. Caleb was likely already in the courthouse, or driving there, unaware that the battlefield had shifted. I needed the source. I needed the person who controlled the judge's schedule. I dialed the number for the Harlan Creek probate clerk's office. I knew it by heart. I had called it 3 times in the last week to check on filing fees. Ring, ring, ring. "Probate division. This is Linda," a voice answered. It sounded bored, surrounded by the rustle of paper. "Linda, this is Isla James," I said, speaking fast, but enunciating every syllable. "I am a beneficiary in the Ridgewell estate case scheduled for this morning. I just received a notification that the hearing was moved to 8:30. "That is correct," Linda said, her voice tightening slightly. She recognized the name. "The judge granted an emergency motion from the petitioners about 10 minutes ago." "On what grounds?" I asked, though I already knew. "The motion states," I could hear her typing, pulling up the file. "It states that you are currently in police custody at the airport following a security incident, and that you are unable to attend. It asks to proceed with the appointment of the personal representative immediately to secure the estate assets." "That is a lie," I said. My voice was loud enough that the man in the aisle seat looked at me, but I didn't care. "Linda, listen to me. I am not in custody. I am sitting on a commercial airplane. I was cleared by the police 20 minutes ago. The report was false. My father called it in to prevent me from getting there." "Ma'am, I cannot take testimony over the phone," Linda said, retreating into bureaucratic defense mode. "If you are not present, your attorney can make that argument." "My attorney does not know yet," I said. "And if the hearing starts at 8:30, it will be over before he can even object. They are trying to steal this estate before I can land." "The judge has already signed the scheduling order," Linda said. "There is nothing I can do." "You can give me an email address," I said. "I beg your pardon?" "I have proof," I said. "I have a police incident slip that says unfounded. I have an airline report that shows my father canceled my ticket and claimed I was mentally unstable. I need the judge to see these documents before he walks onto the bench at 8:30. "We do not accept exhibits via email," Linda said. "You know the rules. Documents must be filed through the portal or presented in open court." "I cannot use the portal from a phone on a taxiing plane," I snapped, "and I cannot be in open court because they sabotaged my travel." "Linda, if you let this hearing proceed based on a lie that you know is a lie, you are becoming part of the fraud. Do you want your name on the transcript when I appeal this? Do you want to be the clerk who refused to look at the evidence that proved the court was being manipulated?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a risky move. Clerks hold an immense amount of soft power. If you insult them, they lose your file. If you scare them, they might just hang up. But I was banking on the fact that court clerks, more than anyone, hate being played. They value the sanctity of their process, and my parents were making a mockery of her process. "We have a secure inbox," Linda said finally, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It is used for judicial review of sensitive exhibits. It is not for public filing." "Give it to me," I said. She recited an email address. It was a complex string of characters ending in judiciary.state.gov. "You have 2 minutes," she said. "The judge takes the bench in 20. I will print whatever lands in that inbox and place it on top of the case file, but I cannot promise he will look at it." "He will look," I said. "Thank you, Linda." I hung up. The plane jolted. We were turning onto the main runway. The engines were beginning to whine. That high-pitched scream that precedes the thrust. I had no scanner. I had no laptop. I had a phone camera and a tray table. I flipped the tray table down. I smoothed out the thermal police slip. My hands were shaking, making the text blur on the screen. "Steady," I told myself. "Breathe." I pressed the phone against my chest to stabilize it, then hovered over the paper. Snap. I swiped to check the image. It was legible. Incident 4922. Unfounded. Next, the airline printout. I flattened the crinkled page. The name Douglas James stood out in the dot matrix font like an accusation. Reason: customer request. Notes: mental health concern. Snap. 2 down. I needed a third. I needed something that tied the emotional manipulation to the legal strategy. Something that showed this was not just a father concerned about safety, but a litigant concerned about winning. I opened my text messages. I scrolled back to yesterday, to the message my mother had sent me when I refused to sign the settlement agreement they had emailed. "If you insist on coming to court and making a scene, we will have no choice but to let the judge know about your history. We have to protect the family, even if it means showing everyone how unstable you have become. Don't make us do this." It was the threat that underpinned everything else. It was the preamble to the police call. I took a screenshot of the text message. I opened my email app. I typed the address Linda had given me. My fingers were flying, tapping out the letters with a ferocity that felt like punching. Subject: Emergency Exhibits, Estate of Ridgewell, Case HC 2024, Isla. James. I attached the 3 images. I did not write a long explanation. The judge did not have time to read a novel. I wrote 3 sentences. 1. Police incident report, 4922, proving I was detained on a false report and released as unfounded at 7:22 a.m. today. 2. Airline record showing Douglas James canceled my flight to prevent my attendance. 3. Text message from mother threatening to fabricate mental instability claims if I attended court. I am currently on a flight. I am not incapacitated. I object to the motion to proceed in absentia. I hit send. The little blue progress bar appeared at the top of the screen. It moved halfway, then stalled. The plane began to accelerate. The force of the thrust pushed me back into my seat. The cabin lights flickered. Sending. The bar crept forward. 70%. "Ma'am!" the flight attendant barked from her jump seat at the front of the cabin. She was looking directly at me. I ignored her. I watched the bar. 80%. The nose of the plane lifted. The runway fell away beneath us. The signal bars in the corner of my phone dropped from 4 to 2. 90%. "Please," I prayed. "Please go." Sent. The word appeared on the screen just as the signal bars vanished completely. I threw the phone onto the empty seat beside me and let out a breath that sounded like a sob. We were airborne. I was suspended in the sky, thousands of feet above the earth, moving at 400 miles an hour away from the place I needed to be. I was physically disconnected from the fight. I could not speak. I could not argue. I could not stand up and point a finger at my father. But the email was gone. The digital packet was racing through the servers, bouncing off towers, diving into fiber optic cables, and arriving in a quiet, carpeted office in Harlan Creek. I looked out the window. The ground was a patchwork of gray and green, shrinking rapidly. My parents thought they had won the race because they controlled the clock. They thought that by moving the hearing to 8:30, they had outrun me. They thought that because I was in the sky, I was silent. They forgot that we live in a world where you do not need to be in the room to drop a bomb. I leaned my head back against the seat. I closed my eyes. There was nothing left to do now but fly. The race on the ground was over. The race in the cloud had just begun. I imagined Linda, the clerk, walking to the printer. I imagined the sound of the pages sliding out. I imagined her walking into the courtroom, past my father in his expensive suit, past my mother with her fake tears, and placing those 3 sheets of paper right on the judge's bench. I hoped the paper was still warm. The seatbelt sign pinged off, but the tension in my chest remained tight, a knotted cord that refused to loosen. We were leveling off at 30,000 feet, the cabin filling with the mundane sounds of beverage carts and rustling magazines. I fumbled for my credit card, my fingers stiff and clumsy, and purchased the high-speed in-flight Wi-Fi. The price was $25, a trivial sum to pay for a lifeline. But in that moment, it felt like the most important transaction of my life. I needed to reach Caleb Rhodes. Caleb was not a high-profile litigator. He did not have billboards on the highway or commercials during the evening news. He was my grandfather's lawyer, a man who seemed carved out of the same oak desk he sat behind. He had been a silent, stoic presence at the funeral, standing in the back while my parents wept their performative tears near the casket. He had not said much to me then, just a nod and a firm handshake that felt like a transfer of responsibility, but his name was on every trust document, every deed, and every amendment my grandfather had signed in the last 40 years. My phone connected to the network. The signal bars turned white. I pulled up his number on WhatsApp, praying the connection would hold for a voice call. I could not type this. I needed to hear a human voice. I needed to know that someone on the ground was actually fighting for me. I put in my earbuds and dialed. Connecting. Ringing. Isla? His voice was gruff, surprised. It sounded like gravel crunching under tires. Caleb, it is me, I whispered, shielding my mouth with my hands so the businessman next to me wouldn't overhear. I am on a plane. I am going to be late. I know, Caleb said. There was no preamble, no polite small talk. The clerk just handed me a stack of papers that looked like they were printed off a hot machine, a police slip, an airline log. I sent them to the judge's secure inbox, I said. Did he see them? He is reading them right now in chambers, Caleb said. But Isla, you need to understand what is happening in this courtroom, the atmosphere. It is not normal probate procedure. What do you mean? Your parents are not just asking to start without you, Caleb said, his voice lowering. They filed a motion 10 minutes ago. They are asking to be appointed as special administrators with immediate effect. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew enough about estate law to know what that meant. A special administrator is an emergency role. It gives someone the legal authority to take control of assets instantly, to freeze accounts, to change locks, to access safe deposit boxes, before the will is even formally admitted to probate. It is a nuclear option, usually reserved for when assets are disappearing or there is no one else to manage the estate. They want the keys, I said. They want control, Caleb corrected. If the judge signs that order at 8:30 this morning, by the time you land in Atlanta, they will have the authority to empty the business accounts at Ridgewell Supply. They could transfer the liquid cash into a holding trust that we would have to spend years litigating to unseal. They are claiming I am unstable, I said. That is their argument, right? That I am a danger to the estate? It is worse than that, Caleb said. They are building a narrative. I am looking at their filing now. They claim that your detainment at the airport is proof of a psychotic break. They are arguing that if the court does not appoint them immediately, you might try to access the corporate accounts and sabotage the family business in a fit of mania. I have never touched the business accounts, I hissed. I am an accountant. Caleb, I respect ledgers more than they do. I know that. You know that. But the judge does not know you, Caleb replied. And right now, they are trying to turn the courtroom into a theater. They want the judge to see you as a liability, not an heir. He paused, and I could hear the shuffling of papers on his end. But here's the thing. Isla, he continued, his tone shifting slightly. Judges are creatures of habit. They like order, and they really, really hate being used as props in a soap opera. Your parents made a mistake. What mistake? They overplayed the hand, Caleb said. Sending the police to the airport? Canceling the ticket? That is not legal strategy. That is harassment. And now that I have these printouts, now that I can prove the security threat was a lie manufactured by Douglas James, the judge is going to look at their motion for special administration very differently. So we can stop them? We can try, Caleb said, but I need more. I need to break their credibility completely. If we catch them in one lie, the judge might think it is just a family spat. I need to show a pattern. I need to show that the deception goes back to the will itself. He took a breath. Isla, do you have the EMS logs? I have them, I said, patting the bag under the seat in front of me. I have the blue folder. I need you to look at something for me, Caleb said. I was reviewing the deposition your father gave last week. He swore under oath that he and your mother were the ones who called 911 the night your grandfather collapsed. He used that to prove he was the primary caregiver, to prove he was the one in control. He lied, I said. The log says the call came in at 7:15. He didn't get there until 8:30. I know the timeline, Caleb said, but I need you to look at the caller identification field on the dispatch sheet. Not the witnesses on scene. The person who actually made the call to the operator. I have a hunch. I reached down and dragged my bag out. I unzipped it, my hands shaking slightly. I pulled out the blue folder and flipped it open on the tray table. The plane banked left, sunlight streaming through the window and illuminating the dense rows of data. I scanned past the medical codes. I scanned past the vitals. Dispatch ID, 4490, call source, landline, reporting party. I stopped. I read the name 3 times. I felt a cold numbness spread through my fingers, up my arms, and settle in the center of my chest. It was not my father's name. It was not my mother's name. It was a name that belonged to the one person in the family I had trusted. The one person who had hugged me at the funeral and told me she would stay out of it. The one person I had texted just yesterday to complain about my parents, thinking I was venting to a neutral ally. Isla? Caleb asked. Who is it? It is Aunt Beatrice, I whispered. Beatrice, my mother's younger sister. The quiet one. The one who always played the role of the peacemaker. The one who claimed she had no interest in the money because she lived a simple life. Beatrice, Caleb repeated. The sound of his pen scratching against paper came through the line. Interesting. Why Beatrice? I asked, my voice trembling. She told me she was in Florida that week. She told me she didn't get into town until the day he died. She lied, Caleb said flatly. And if she made the call from the landline in the house at 7:15, that means she was there when the new will was supposedly being discussed. Your father claims he was there receiving instructions, but the phone log places Beatrice in the house, not him. They are working together, I realized. The betrayal felt sharper than the police interrogation. She is the witness. She is the one who is going to corroborate their story. She is the leak, Caleb said. She is likely the one who told them your flight number. She is the one who told them you were bringing the documents. I closed my eyes. All the text messages I had sent her, all the updates about my travel plans. I had handed my parents the ammunition to shoot me down, and I had used Beatrice as the courier. This is good, Isla, Caleb said, his voice hard. It hurts, I know, but legally, this is gold. If we can prove Beatrice was there and your father wasn't, his affidavit is perjury. And if Beatrice is the one who called 911 but failed to mention the emergency will to the paramedics, it implies the will didn't exist until they concocted it later. What do I do? I asked. Take a picture of that page, Caleb commanded. High resolution. Focus on the reporting party field and the timestamp. Send it to me right now. I am going to walk into the judge's chambers and drop a grenade. I snapped the photo. I hit send. Received, Caleb said a moment later. Okay, listen to me carefully. The judge is about to take the bench. I am going to argue that the motion for special administration is premature because the petitioners have unclean hands. That is the legal term for they are lying liars who are lying. Will it work? It might buy us a few hours, Caleb said. But you need to be prepared for their counter-move. If they realize the fraud angle is failing, they are going to pivot back to safety. Safety? I heard the opposing counsel talking in the hallway, Caleb said. They are drafting a petition for an ex parte protective order. A restraining order? I asked, incredulous. Against me? They are going to claim that your meltdown at the airport constitutes a threat of domestic violence, Caleb explained. If the judge signs a protective order, you will be legally barred from entering the courthouse or coming within 500 feet of your parents. So even if I land, even if I drive there, you would be arrested the moment you stepped onto the courthouse steps, Caleb finished. It is not about the money anymore. Isla, they are trying to erase you. They want to use the power of the state to make you physically disappear from the legal process. I looked out the window. We were cruising over a blanket of white clouds. The world below looked peaceful, abstract, but down there, in a wood-paneled room in Harlan Creek, my family was trying to turn me into a ghost. They are trying to delete me, I said. They are trying, Caleb said. But they forgot one thing. Ghosts do not have excellent lawyers. He paused. I have to go in. The bailiff just opened the doors. Keep your phone on. If I text you, answer immediately. And Isla? Yes? Do not let them get in your head, he said. They want you angry. They want you to land in Atlanta and scream at the gate agent. They want more evidence of the crazy daughter. Do not give it to them. Be ice. Be stone. I am calm, I lied. Good. I will see you on the ground. The line clicked dead. I pulled the earbuds out. I stared at the blue folder. The name Beatrice seemed to mock me from the paper. I had thought this was a battle over an inheritance. I thought it was about who got the house and who got the stocks. But as I sat there, suspended between the airport police and the courtroom, I realized the stakes were much more primal. My parents didn't just want the money, they wanted validation. They wanted the court to agree with them that I was the problem. They wanted a judge to sign a piece of paper that said, legally and officially, that I was broken. They wanted to win the argument they had been having with me since I was 16 years old. I looked at the time on my phone. 8:15 in the morning. The hearing was starting in 15 minutes. I put the blue folder away. I sat back in my seat. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. In for 4. Out for 4. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not be the daughter they described. I would be the witness they feared. My phone was a lifeline, burning hot against my ear as I pressed it tight, terrified that the roar of the jet engines outside the window would drown out the faint. Tinny signal coming from 300 miles away. Caleb had kept the line open. He had slipped his phone into his breast pocket, the microphone facing out, turning me into a silent, invisible ghost haunting the proceedings I was supposed to be leading. I closed my eyes and focused entirely on the audio landscape, the world of the airplane cabin, the beverage cart rattling in the aisle, the baby crying in row 30, the businessman typing on his laptop next to me, faded away. In its place, I constructed the courtroom in my mind. I heard the heavy, distinctive thud of the bailiff closing the double doors. I heard the squeak of leather shoes on parquet flooring. I heard the rustle of stiff paper, likely the stacks of motions my parents had filed in their race to bury me. All rise, a voice boomed. It sounded distant, filtered through layers of fabric and static, but the authority was unmistakable. The Honorable Judge Vance presiding. There was the sound of chairs scraping back, a collective shuffle of fabric, and then the heavy clump of the judge taking the bench. Be seated, the judge said. His voice was deep, weary, and impatient. We are here on an emergency motion in the matter of the estate of William H. Ridgewell, case number HC 2024. I see the petitioners are present. Counsel for the petitioners? Good morning, Your Honor. A smooth, confident voice answered. I recognized it immediately. It was my parents' lawyer, a man named Sterling who charged $600 an hour to make bullying sound like jurisprudence. we are proceeding on an ex parte basis due to the urgency of the situation. And Mr. Rhodes, the judge said, you are here for the beneficiary, Isla James? I am, Your Honor. Caleb's voice came through. It was closer to the microphone, gruff and steady, and I strenuously object to the characterization of this hearing as ex parte. My client is not absent by choice. She is absent by design. We will get to that, the judge said. Mr. Sterling, this is your motion. You are asking for immediate special administration powers, effectively bypassing the standard probate timeline. You are asking me to hand the keys to a multi-million-dollar estate to your clients before the body is even cold. Why? Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a somber register. It brings us no joy to do this, but the estate is in danger. The primary beneficiary, Ms. James, is currently suffering from a severe mental health crisis. We have credible reports that she is erratic, volatile, and potentially violent. I gripped the armrest of my seat. My knuckles turned white. Call your witness, the judge said. I call Douglas James. Sterling said, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching the stand. I heard the oath being administered. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, my father said. His voice was a masterpiece of deception. It was not the angry voice he used when he screamed at me in the kitchen. It was not the cold voice he used on the phone. It was the voice of a heartbroken father who had done everything he could and failed. Mr. James, Sterling asked, please tell the court why you are requesting emergency control of the assets. It is my daughter, Douglas said. He paused, letting the silence do the work for him. Isla has struggled for years, but since my father died, she has unraveled. This morning, we tried to get her help, but she went to the airport. She was trying to flee. I think, or maybe she was coming here to cause a scene. I do not know. And what happened at the airport? Sterling prompted. She was detained, Douglas said. Security stopped her. The police had to get involved. I was told she was dragged out of the security line like a criminal. She was making threats. She was screaming that she would make us pay. It was humiliating. But more than that, it was terrifying. If she comes into this courtroom, Your Honor, or if she gets access to the bank accounts, I fear she will burn it all down. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from pure, incandescent rage. He was painting a picture of a monster, and he was using my name to sign it. So, to clarify, Sterling said, your daughter is currently in police custody? That is my understanding, Douglas said. She was deemed a threat to public safety. She is not stable enough to be here, and she is certainly not stable enough to manage a trust. There was a silence. In the courtroom, it probably felt like sympathy. To me, it felt like a noose tightening. Mr. Rhodes? The judge asked. Cross? No cross-examination at this time, Your Honor, Caleb said. But I would like to direct the court's attention to the exhibits I submitted to the clerk 5 minutes ago, marked as Respondent's Exhibit A. I have them, the judge said. There was the sound of paper being flipped. Mr. James, the judge said, addressing my father directly. You just testified that your daughter was dragged away like a criminal and is currently in custody. Is that your sworn testimony? Yes, Your Honor, Douglas said. That is what I was told. By whom? The judge asked. By the authorities. Douglas stammered slightly. I made a report for her safety, and they acted on it. The authorities, the judge repeated. Interesting, because I am looking at an official incident report from the Airport Police Department, incident number 4922. It is time-stamped 7:22 in the morning. Today, the air in the courtroom seemed to vanish. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Clerk, please read the disposition line of this report for the record, the judge ordered. A female voice, likely the clerk I had spoken to, spoke up. Her voice was clear and sharp. Disposition. Subject stopped, identified, and cleared, No weapons found, no threat detected, subject released, report determined to be unfounded. Unfounded, the judge said, letting the word hang in the air like a guillotine blade. And there is a note here. Mr. James, reporting party suspected of malicious intent. That reporting party is listed as you. Your Honor, Sterling interrupted, his voice losing its smooth polish. My client was acting out of concern. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, the judge snapped. I am talking to your client. Mr. James, the judge continued, his voice dropping in temperature. You stood there and told me your daughter was a criminal in custody. This piece of paper says she was a harassment victim who was released. Do not diagnose your daughter in my courtroom as a legal tactic, and certainly do not lie to me about her arrest status when the police report is sitting on my bench. I must have been misinformed, Douglas said. The smoothness was gone. He sounded small. I thought, let us look at Exhibit B, the judge said, cutting him off. Mr. Rhodes, walk us through this. Thank you, Your Honor, Caleb said. This is a printout from the airline's passenger activity log. As you can see, Isla James's ticket was canceled at 7:18 in the morning. Canceled by whom? The judge asked. The log lists the caller, Caleb said. Douglas James. Mr. James, the judge said. You testified that you were afraid your daughter was unsafe. You said she was unable to travel. But this log suggests she was perfectly able to travel until you called the airline and canceled her seat. She wasn't safe to fly alone, Douglas protested. I did it to protect her. You did it to stop her from coming here, the judge countered. And then you came into my court and argued that we had to proceed without her because she was detained. You created the absence you are now using as grounds for your motion. That is not protection. Mr. James, that is obstruction. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of a room realizing that the villain was not the person absent, but the person on the stand. Exhibit C, the judge said, sounding tired now. A text message from, let me see, Mother, presumably your wife. Mrs. James? Yes, Your Honor, Caleb said. The text reads, If you insist on coming to court, we will have no choice but to let the judge know about your history. We have to protect the family, even if it means showing everyone how unstable you have become. This was sent yesterday. It looks like premeditation to me, Caleb said. They threatened to paint her as unstable if she attended. She tried to attend, so they painted her as unstable. The judge sighed. It was a heavy, resigned sound. Is Ms. James available? The judge asked. She is, Your Honor, Caleb said. She is currently on a flight that she had to book at the last minute because her original ticket was fraudulently canceled. I have her on the line. Ms. James? The judge said. His voice was projected, likely Caleb holding the phone up. I took a deep breath. I pressed the phone closer to my mouth. I ignored the passengers around me. I am here, Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. I am currently on Flight 719 to Atlanta. Ms. James, are you currently under arrest? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. Are you currently suffering from a mental health crisis that would prevent you from understanding the proceedings of this estate? No, Your Honor, I said. The only crisis I am suffering from is that my father tried to have me arrested to keep me out of your courtroom. I believe you, the judge said. 3 words, I believe you. They washed over me like cool water. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, your motion for special administration is denied. Your motion to proceed in absentia is denied, and frankly, I am very close to sanctioning your client for filing a frivolous motion based on perjured testimony. Your Honor, Sterling tried to object. Quiet, the judge said. I am not appointing your clients as personal representatives. I am not giving them the keys to anything. In fact, given the behavior I have seen today, the police report, the airline interference, I am concerned about the safety of the estate assets in their hands. I am appointing an independent third-party administrator, the judge announced. The court will select a fiduciary to manage the Ridgewell estate until a full hearing can be held with all beneficiaries present. Mr. James, Mrs. James, you are ordered to turn over all keys, financial records, and access codes to the court clerk by 5 o'clock today. You are not to touch a single dime. But, Douglas started, if you interrupt me again, I will have you held in contempt, the judge warned. And I am rescheduling the full hearing on the will contest. We will reconvene on Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning. That gives Ms. James time to land, drive here, and walk through those doors without being harassed by law enforcement or airline agents. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Sterling mumbled. Yes, Your Honor, Caleb said, his voice ringing with victory. And Mr. James, the judge added, I am keeping these exhibits in the file, the police report, the airline log. If there is any further interference with Ms. James's travel, if she gets so much as a flat tire on the way to Harlan Creek, I will assume it was you, and I will issue a bench warrant. Do you understand? I understand, Douglas whispered. Court is adjourned, the judge said. Bang. The gavel struck. The sound resonated through the phone speaker, vibrating against my ear. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Did you hear that? Caleb's voice came back on the line. Breathless. I heard it, I said. I was crying now. Silent, hot tears streaming down my face. He denied them. They lost control. They didn't just lose control, Caleb said. They lost their camouflage. The judge sees them now. He sees them for exactly what they are. Thank you, Caleb, I whispered. Thank you. Do not thank me, Caleb said. You got the evidence. You got the paper. I just read it. He lowered his voice. I am going to hang up now. I need to go deal with the clerk and make sure the independent administrator is set up. You just fly, land, get the rental car, and drive safe. We have a hearing on Friday. I will be there, I said. I know you will, he said. The line clicked dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen. The call had lasted 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, the entire trajectory of my life had shifted. I looked up. The flight attendant was walking down the aisle with a trash bag. She looked at me, seeing the tears on my face. Are you okay, honey? She asked, pausing. I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, the air in my lungs didn't feel heavy. Yes, I said. I am better than okay. I looked out the window at the clouds below. I wasn't just a passenger anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was the woman who had testified from the sky and brought a courtroom to its knees. My father had tried to use the system to crush me. He had used the police, the airline, the court docket. He had pulled every lever of power he had access to, and I had broken every single one of them with 3 pieces of paper and a $25 Wi-Fi connection. But as the adrenaline faded, a new thought settled in, a colder thought. My father was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a man who escalated. He had lost the legal battle for temporary control. He had been humiliated in front of a judge. He had been stripped of his power over the estate. He was cornered, and a cornered animal does not follow the rules of civil procedure. The judge had warned him not to interfere with my travel. But Douglas James didn't care about warnings. He cared about winning. I had won the hearing, but I still had to survive the drive to Harlan Creek. And I had a feeling that the road to the courthouse was going to be a lot more dangerous than the flight. The tires of the rental car crunched over the gravel driveway of a small, unassuming brick building on the outskirts of Harlan Creek. It was a stark contrast to the glass and steel architecture of the airport I had just left behind. The sign out front was peeling slightly, reading Henderson and Associates, certified public accountants. This was where the money had been counted before my parents tried to steal it. I turned off the ignition and sat for a moment in the silence. The journey from the airport in Atlanta had been a blur of interstate highways and winding back roads. A 2-hour drive that felt like a decompression chamber. I had kept my eyes on the rearview mirror the entire time. half expecting to see my father's silver sedan tailing me. But the road had been empty. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent for now, but heavy with the digital debris of the morning, before I had even left the airport. The judge had issued a supplemental order. Caleb had forwarded it to me while I was standing at the rental car counter. It was a terrifyingly specific document. The judge had ordered full and immediate discovery of all communications regarding the police report and the flight cancellation. He wanted phone logs. He wanted text messages. He wanted emails. And he had attached a warning that made my accountant brain hum with satisfaction. Failure to comply will result in sanctions, including but not limited to striking of pleadings and entry of default judgment. Basically, the judge had told my parents that if they hid a single text message, he would hand the entire estate to me by default. Caleb had called me as I merged onto the highway. "They are panicking," he had said, his voice sounding clearer now that I was on the ground. "I just saw Sterling in the hallway. He looks like a man who just found out his client handed him a live grenade. They overplayed it. Isla, they got greedy. If they had just fought the will, it would have been a standard case. But by trying to stop you physically, they made the court look at their character, not just their legal arguments." "What happens now?" I had asked, watching the city skyline fade in my mirror. "Now, we dig," Caleb had said. "The hearing is Friday. That gives us 48 hours to find out why they were so desperate to keep you away. It is not just about the money, Isla. People fight for money all the time, but people commit felonies to hide secrets. Go see Henderson. He knows where the bodies are buried, or at least where the receipts are filed." So here I was. I grabbed my bag, clutching the blue folder against my ribs, and stepped out into the humid afternoon air. The door to the office chimed as I pushed it open. The smell inside was instant nostalgia, old paper, dust, and peppermint. "Mr. Henderson was sitting behind a desk that looked like a fortress built of manila folders. He was a man in his late 70s, with wisps of white hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes. He had been my grandfather's accountant for 40 years. The kind of man who still used a paper ledger because he didn't trust the cloud. "Isla," he said, standing up slowly. He didn't smile, but his expression was soft. "I heard about the airport. Caleb called me." "It was a long morning," I said, sinking into the leather chair opposite him. "Your father always did have a flair for the dramatic," Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. "But calling the police? That is a new low, even for Douglas." He shuffled some papers on his desk, clearing a space. "Caleb said you needed to see the history," Henderson said. "I have the books here for the supply cooperative. I have the personal trust filings. But I do not think that is what you are looking for." "I need to know why they are so afraid of me being there," I said. "They have the new will. They have the affidavit. If they were so confident they had won, why risk jail time to stop me from attending a procedural hearing?" Henderson looked at me for a long moment. Then, he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a single, sealed envelope. It wasn't a legal envelope, it was a personal one, yellowing slightly at the edges. "Your grandfather was a sharp man." "Isla," Henderson said quietly. He knew his health was failing, but more importantly, he knew his family. He knew your father's ambition, and he knew your mother's malleability. He slid the envelope across the desk, but he kept his hand on it. "About 6 months ago, right after he was diagnosed with the heart condition, William came to see me. He didn't want to talk about taxes. He wanted to talk about risk management. He told me he was worried that if he died, Douglas would try to rewrite history." "He knew?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "He suspected," Henderson corrected. "He told me, 'Arthur, if I die, and if Isla tries to step up, they are going to try to break her. They will use her history against her. They will say she is weak. They will say she is crazy.'" I felt a chill run through me. It was exactly what they had done. It was exactly the script they had read in court 3 hours ago. "He sent me an email the next day," Henderson said. "He wanted a digital record. I printed it out for you. He handed me a sheet of paper. It was a printout of an email dated August 14th, 2025. Subject: Contingency. Arthur, I am putting a safeguard in place. I have drafted a supplemental letter of instruction. It is not part of the main will. It is a codicil that only activates under specific conditions. I am afraid that Douglas will not just contest the will. I am afraid he will try to physically or legally prevent Isla from taking her seat at the table. If that happens, if there is any evidence of obstruction, any evidence of them trying to silence her, I want the letter opened. I read the email twice. My hands were shaking. He predicted it, I whispered. He didn't just predict a fight. He predicted obstruction. He knew them better than they knew themselves, Henderson said. He knew that Douglas could not win a fair fight, so he would try to rig the game, and William hated a rigged game. Where is the letter? I asked. The letter of instruction? It is filed with the court, Henderson said. But it is filed under seal. It is in a break glass in case of emergency status. Nobody sees it unless a specific trigger event occurs. It sits in the vault of the probate clerk, marked, "Do not open unless petitioned for cause." I looked at Henderson, realizing the magnitude of what he was saying. The airport, I said. The police report. The cancellation. That is the cause. Exactly, Henderson said. Caleb is filing the motion right now. He is arguing that the events of this morning constitute the obstruction your grandfather predicted. If the judge agrees, that envelope gets opened on Friday. What is in it? I asked. Henderson shook his head. I do not know. William wrote it himself, sealed it, and handed it to the clerk personally. He didn't even let me read it. He just told me, if they play dirty, this cleans the board. I sat back in the chair. My grandfather had turned his death into a trap. He had dangled the estate in front of my parents, knowing they would grab for it, and he had hidden a landmine right beneath the prize, rigged to explode only if they cheated. They do not know it exists, I realized. They think they are fighting over the will. They do not know there is a second document waiting for them. They are fighting a war on the surface, Henderson said. Your grandfather fought it in the deep water. My phone buzzed on the desk. Then it buzzed again and again, a rapid-fire staccato of vibration that shattered the quiet of the office. I looked down. Mother, mother, mother. I didn't pick up. I unlocked the screen and opened the message thread. It was a wall of text, a stream of consciousness pouring out of a woman who was losing control. Isla, please pick up. We are so worried about you. Dad is a mess. We didn't mean for the police to be so rough. We just wanted to make sure you were safe. I scrolled down. Why are you doing this to us? Do you know how much stress you are causing the family? Dad has high blood pressure. If something happens to him, it is on your hands. I scrolled further. The tone shifted, snapping from victimhood to aggression in the span of 3 minutes. You are ungrateful. After everything we did for you, we paid for your school, we bought you that car, and this is how you repay us? By dragging our name through the mud in front of a judge? You are sick. Isla, you need help. Come home and let us take care of this. It was the classic cycle, the Darvo maneuver, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. First, they denied they hurt me. We just wanted you safe. Then they attacked me. You are ungrateful. Then they reversed the roles, making themselves the victims of my cruelty. Dad is a mess. I looked at the messages with a detachment that surprised me. A year ago. These texts would have made me cry. They would have made me question my own reality. I would have wondered if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was sick. But sitting in that office, with the smell of old paper and the weight of my grandfather's foresight in my hands, I felt nothing but a cold, clinical resolve. She is texting you, isn't she? Henderson asked gently. She is trying to reset the narrative, I said. She wants me to engage. She wants me to scream back so she can show the text to the judge and say, "See? Look how abusive she is." Do not reply, Henderson warned. Silence is the one thing they cannot manipulate. I am not going to reply, I said. I tapped the screen, taking a screenshot of the entire thread. Then I tapped the Save to Files button. I renamed the file evidence_harassment_ January 28th. I am documenting, I said. I am building the library. I looked up at Henderson. Did you know about the other witness? I asked. The EMS logs show that Beatrice was at the house that night. Henderson's eyes widened slightly behind his thick lenses. Beatrice? Are you sure? Her name is on the dispatch report, I said. And the call came from the landline. Henderson leaned back, interlacing his fingers. Beatrice has always been financially dependent on your parents. Douglas has bailed her out of credit card debt 3 times in the last 10 years. I wrote the checks myself from his personal account. So he bought her, I said. He bought her silence, and he bought her testimony. If Beatrice was there, Henderson mused, and if she admits that Douglas wasn't, then the affidavit supporting the new will collapses. It becomes fraud. She is the weak link, I said. She is, Henderson agreed. But be careful, Isla. A weak link is also a volatile one. If they think she is going to crack, they will tighten the screws on her. They will terrify her. They tried to terrify me, I said, standing up and gathering the email printout. It didn't work. You are William's granddaughter, Henderson said, a small smile touching his lips. You have his spine. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the frame. Thank you, Arthur, I said, for keeping this safe. I didn't keep it safe, he said. I just waited for the right time. Go get them. Isla. I walked back out to the car. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the gravel. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors immediately. I checked my phone again. There was a voicemail from Caleb. Isla, I just filed the motion to unseal the codicil. The judge set a hearing on it for Friday, right before the main arguments. He wants to know what is in that envelope before he decides who runs the estate. Also, I sent a subpoena to Beatrice. She is going to be deposed on Thursday afternoon. We are going to break her. Isla. Stay safe. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I drove toward the town of Harlan Creek. I wasn't just driving to a hotel. I was driving toward a confrontation that had been building for 34 years. My parents had spent my entire life telling me I was powerless, that I was fragile, that I needed them to interpret the world for me. They had built a house of cards on that lie. And on Friday morning, I was going to open an envelope that would blow it all down. I pulled onto the main road, Route 44, which wound its way through the dense pine forest toward the county seat. The trees stood like silent sentinels on either side of the asphalt. My phone buzzed again, another text from my mother. Don't bother coming to the house. We changed the locks. I let out a short, dry laugh. They changed the locks on the house, but they didn't realize that I wasn't trying to get into the house. I was trying to get into the truth, and for that, I didn't need a key. I had a blue folder, an old accountant, and a ghost who had left me a map. I drove on, the blue folder sitting on the passenger seat like a co-pilot, guiding me through the maze. The conference room in Caleb's office was not glamorous. It was a windowless box filled with the smell of stale coffee and the dry, dusty scent of legal briefs. But to me, it felt like a war room. The table was covered in documents, bank statements, corporate filings, and land deeds, spread out like a map of my grandfather's life. For the last 3 hours, Caleb and I had been dissecting the anatomy of the estate. Until today, I had assumed this fight was simply about money. I thought my parents wanted the cash balance in the checking accounts to fund their country club memberships and their renovations. But as we peeled back the layers of the Ridgewell fortune, I realized I had been thinking too small. It is not just the liquidity, Caleb said, sliding a thick binder across the mahogany table. Look at this, the Ridgewell Supply Cooperative. I opened the binder. It was a corporate charter for a massive agricultural supply network that serviced 3 counties. My grandfather had not just owned shares. He held the controlling interest. He held the voting rights. Whoever controls these shares controls the board of directors, Caleb explained, tapping the page with his pen. They control the vendor contracts. They control the real estate holdings of the cooperative. We are talking about 50 years of accumulated land rights. I stared at the pages. My father does not care about agriculture. He does not know a combine harvester from a lawnmower. No, Caleb said darkly, but he knows about land development, and the cooperative sits on 500 acres of prime commercial real estate just off the new highway expansion. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My father did not want to run the business. He wanted to gut it. He wanted to dissolve the cooperative, sell the land to developers, and cash out. He was going to dismantle my grandfather's life work and turn it into a strip mall. And here is the smoking gun. Henderson, the accountant, said from the corner of the room. He had joined us an hour ago, bringing with him a file that he had kept in his personal safe. He placed a single sheet of paper on top of the pile. It was a photocopy of a bank authorization form. Look at the date, Henderson instructed. I leaned in. January 14th, 2026. That was 2 days after the funeral, I said. We had not even read the will yet. Exactly, Henderson said. This is a change of signatory request for the primary LLC account. Your father tried to remove your grandfather's name and insert his own as the sole authorized signer. I scanned the document. It was signed Douglas James in his flamboyant, looping script, but at the bottom, there was a red stamp. Rejected. Security flag. Why was it rejected? I asked. Because the bank officer knew William, Henderson said with a grim smile. He knew William had strict protocols. The protocol required 2 signatures for any transfer of authority. William's and yours. Your father tried to bypass you. He told the bank manager that you were unavailable and that he had emergency power of attorney. He lied to the bank, I whispered. That is bank fraud. It is attempted bank fraud, Caleb corrected, but it proves intent. It proves that his plan wasn't to wait for the probate court to rule. He wanted to seize the steering wheel before anyone realized the car was moving. This changed everything. My parents weren't just grieving relatives who disagreed with a will. They were corporate raiders. And the airport stunt? The police report? The flight cancellation? Those weren't emotional outbursts. They were tactical strikes designed to keep the only other signatory, me, away from the bank until the ink was dry. We have the motive, Caleb said, leaning back in his chair. Now we need to nail down the method. We need to break the narrative of the lucid conversation. He pulled the blue EMS folder from the stack. This was the document I had carried through the airport, the one my father had been so desperate to destroy. We deposed Beatrice an hour ago, Caleb said. She came in through the back door. She was shaking so hard she could barely hold a glass of water. Did she talk? I asked. She tried to stick to the script, Caleb said. She kept saying, Douglas was there, but then I showed her this. He pointed to a line in the dispatch log. Patient condition upon arrival. Alert and oriented, ×4. Patient stating clear intent regarding medical intervention. Alert and oriented, I repeated. That means he wasn't confused. He wasn't entering dementia. He knew exactly who he was, where he was, and what was happening. And look at the timestamp, Caleb said. 7:15 in the evening, the paramedics were there, Beatrice was there, but the log notes regarding family present only list Beatrice Miller, sister-in-law. There is no mention of Douglas James until the second log entry at 8:45. So Douglas wasn't in the room when Grandpa was alert, I said, piecing it together. He arrived after Grandpa lost consciousness. Which means, Caleb said, his voice low and sharp, that the conversation my father claims he had with Grandpa regarding the new will, the conversation where Grandpa supposedly said he wanted to cut me out, never happened. It is physically impossible. Grandpa was unconscious by the time Douglas walked in the door. What did Beatrice say when you showed her that? I asked. Caleb smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just sprung a trap. "She crumbled," he said. "She didn't confess on the record. Not fully, but she started crying. She said, 'Douglas told me it was for the best. He told me the family needed to be protected.' She admitted that Douglas gave her a summary of events to memorize in the car on the way to the funeral home. 'She was coached,' I said. 'From the very first night.' 'We have enough,' Caleb said, standing up and pacing the small room. 'We have the bank fraud attempt. We have the perjured affidavit about the timeline. We have the coerced witness, and we have the airport obstruction.' My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the court clerk. Caleb picked it up, reading the screen. His eyebrows shot up. 'The judge just issued an order regarding our motion to unseal,' he said. 'And?' I asked, my breath catching in my throat. 'Granted,' Caleb said. 'He is opening the envelope. The letter of instruction will be unsealed and read into the record at the hearing tomorrow morning. The judge stated that the evidence of interference at the airport was sufficient cause to trigger the contingency.' I felt a shiver run down my spine. The ghost of my grandfather was stepping into the courtroom. I spent that night in a hotel room near the courthouse, but I did not sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights of Harlan Creek flicker in the humid air. I held the copy of the EMS log in my hand, tracing the lines of data that proved the truth. But it wasn't the data that kept me awake. It was the realization of what my grandfather had done. He hadn't just left me money. He hadn't just left me a business. He had known, with a terrifying clarity, exactly who his son was. He had looked at his own child and seen a predator, and instead of fighting him while he was alive, when he was weak and sick, he had built a mechanism to defeat him from the grave. He had created a test. If Douglas plays fair, he gets his share. If Douglas cheats, the trap springs. I remembered a conversation I had with Grandpa years ago, when we were fishing on the lake. He had told me, "Isla, there are two kinds of people in this world. People who build things, and people who wait for things to fall so they can pick up the pieces. Never be the second kind." My father was the second kind, and he had been so busy waiting for the empire to fall that he hadn't noticed the foundation was rigged with explosives. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Caleb. "I have been reading case law all night," he said, his voice raspy with fatigue. "I think I know what is in that letter. Or at least, I know what legal mechanism he likely used." "What is it?" I asked. "It is called an in terrorem clause, but on steroids," Caleb said. "Usually, a no-contest clause just says if you challenge the will, you get nothing. But your grandfather, he was smarter than that. I think he tied the inheritance not just to the validity of the will, but to the conduct of the beneficiaries." "Conduct?" "I think the clause says that if any beneficiary attempts to obstruct, harass, or legally impede another beneficiary or the court process itself, they forfeit their entire interest," Caleb explained. "It is a bad faith trigger." I sat up on the edge of the bed. "The airport," I whispered. "Exactly," Caleb said. "If my theory is right, then by calling the police and canceling your flight, your father didn't just annoy the judge. He pulled the trigger on his own disinheritance. He literally called in the airstrike on himself." The irony was so sharp it almost cut. My father had tried to use the law to stop me, and in doing so, he had violated the one condition my grandfather had set for him to receive a penny. "He did it to himself," I said. "I didn't have to do anything. I just had to show up. And that is why you need to walk into that courtroom today with your head high," Caleb said. "You are not going in there to beg for your share, Isla. You are going in there to watch them realize they committed financial suicide." I showered and dressed in the dark navy suit I had packed days ago. Before the world turned upside down, I brushed my hair back, looking at my reflection in the cheap hotel mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the scared girl who had stood in the security line at the airport, wondering if she was crazy. She was the CEO of a situation she finally understood. I drove to the courthouse at 8:30. The morning was bright and clear. I parked my rental car in the lot, right next to my father's silver sedan. I saw them standing on the courthouse steps. My mother was wearing a black dress, looking fragile and tragic. My father was pacing, talking on his phone, his hand chopping the air in aggressive gestures. When they saw me, they froze. My father hung up the phone. He stared at me. He looked for the fear. He looked for the instability he had promised the court he would find. But I just walked past them. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at my shoes. I looked him right in the eye. And for the first time in my life, I saw him flinch. He saw the blue folder in my hand. He saw the incident slip sticking out of the top. But more than that, he saw that I wasn't playing his game anymore. I walked through the metal detectors, the same kind of machine that had been the start of my nightmare 24 hours ago. This time, I didn't beep. I didn't get stopped. I walked through to the other side, picked up my bag, and headed for courtroom 4. Inside, the room was packed. The independent administrator appointed by the judge was sitting at a side table. The clerk was arranging files, and there, sitting on the judge's bench, was a thick, sealed manila envelope with red tape across the flap. It sat there like an unexploded bomb. Caleb was already at the plaintiff's table. He stood up when I entered. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I said. I sat down. I placed the EMS logs on the table. I placed the airport police slip next to them. I placed the airline cancellation record next to that. My parents entered the room a moment later. They sat at the table across the aisle. My father wouldn't look at the judge's bench. He wouldn't look at the envelope. He kept his eyes fixed on me, a look of pure, distilled hatred. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Vance walked in. He looked different today. Yesterday, he had been annoyed. Today, he looked solemn. He looked like a man who was about to deliver a history lesson. "Be seated," the judge said. He looked at my parents. Then he looked at me. Then he reached out and placed his hand on the sealed envelope. "We are here to open the codicil to the last will and testament of William H. Ridgewell," the judge announced. "This document was filed under seal with instructions to be opened only upon a finding of obstruction by a party to this estate. Yesterday, this court made such a finding based on the conduct of Mr. Douglas James." My father shifted in his seat. His lawyer, Sterling, leaned over and whispered something to him, but my father pulled away. "I have reviewed the seal," the judge said. "It is intact. I will now open the document and read it into the record." The sound of tearing paper was the loudest noise in the world. The judge pulled out a single, handwritten letter. He put on his reading glasses. He took a moment to read it silently first. As he read, his eyebrows went up. He paused. He looked over the top of his glasses at my father. It was a look of pity. "This is the letter of instruction," the judge began, his voice echoing off the wood paneling. "Dated August 14th, 2025, written in the hand of the decedent." I held my breath. The room ceased to exist. There was only the voice. "To my family and to the court," the judge read. "If you are reading this, it means that my fears have been realized. It means that instead of honoring my memory, someone has tried to prevent the truth from being heard." I felt Caleb's hand gently touch my arm. "I have left the bulk of my estate to be divided, but I know the greed that can rot a family. Therefore, I include this condition. If any beneficiary is found by a court of law to have obstructed, harassed, or impeded the travel or legal rights of another beneficiary in an attempt to influence the outcome of this probate," the judge paused. He looked directly at Douglas. "Then that beneficiary shall be treated as if they had predeceased me. Their share shall be forfeited in its entirety." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. It didn't come from me. It came from my mother. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "if such obstruction occurs, the forfeited share shall not return to the general pot. It shall be transferred immediately to the sole control of the beneficiary who was the target of the obstruction, to do with as she sees fit." Trusting that she has the integrity I admired in life, the judge lowered the paper. "Mr. James," the judge said to my father. "You spent yesterday ensuring that your daughter could not get here. You called the police." The judge held the single sheet of yellowing paper in his hands, his eyes scanning the handwritten script of a man who had been dead for 3 weeks but was currently the most powerful person in the room. My father, Douglas James, had stopped shouting. He had slumped back into his chair, his face a mask of pale, sweating dread. He knew his father's handwriting, he knew the tone, and he knew, with the instinct of a man who had spent his life cutting corners, that he had just run into a wall he could not charm his way over. "This is a supplemental letter of instruction," Judge Vance said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the gallery. "It is titled Regarding the Integrity of My Legacy. It is dated August 14th, 2025. The judge looked over his reading glasses at the defense table. "I will read the relevant section into the record," the judge announced. "William Ridgewell writes, I have spent 50 years building this family and this business. I know the strengths of my children, and I know their weaknesses. My greatest fear is not that my estate will be lost, but that it will be stolen by those who feel entitled to it rather than responsible for it." I felt a lump form in my throat. I could hear my grandfather's voice in every syllable. It was blunt, honest, and stripped of the polite fiction we usually maintained at family dinners. "Therefore," the judge continued, reading the next paragraph with deliberate slowness, "I specifically desire that my granddaughter, Isla James, be present and heard at any proceeding regarding the disposition of my assets. She is the only one who listens before she speaks. However, I predict that my son, Douglas, or those acting under his influence, may attempt to silence her or physically prevent her from attending such proceedings." My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. The accuracy of the prediction was terrifying. It was as if he had watched the security footage from the airport this morning before he even died. "If this occurs," the judge read, his voice hardening, "if there is any evidence that a beneficiary has used legal maneuvering, physical obstruction, or false reporting to bar another beneficiary from the court, I invoke the bad faith penalty clause of the accompanying trust." The judge paused. He turned the page. "In such an event, the share of the estate designated for the offending party, specifically the controlling interest in the Ridgewell Supply Cooperative and the liquid assets held in the primary family trust, shall not pass to them. Instead, it shall be immediately forfeited and transferred, in its entirety, to the William H. Ridgewell Agricultural Scholarship Fund, to be administered by an independent trustee." The room erupted. "No!" my father yelled, standing up again, ignoring his lawyer's frantic hand on his arm. "That is not legal. You cannot just give my company to a charity because I made a phone call." "Sit down, Mr. James." Judge Vance slammed his gavel down. "I am not giving it away because you made a phone call. I am executing the conditions of the will because you committed obstruction. You triggered the clause. You did this." Caleb stood up. He didn't look triumphant. He looked focused. He knew that the letter was a powerful opening salvo. But we needed to seal the coffin. We needed to prove the obstruction wasn't just a misunderstanding as my father would inevitably claim on appeal. We needed to prove it was a conspiracy. "Your Honor," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the noise, "if I may, the letter of instruction provides the penalty, but the timeline provides the proof of intent. I would like to direct the court to the sequence of events." Caleb walked to the center of the aisle. He held up a timeline he had sketched on a whiteboard during the recess. At 6:45 in the morning, the police at the airport receive a call about a threat from Isla James, Caleb said. At 7:18 in the morning, while Ms. James is detained, her flight is canceled. At 8 o'clock in the morning, opposing counsel files an emergency motion to proceed in absentia, citing her detainment as the reason she cannot attend. These are not coincidences. Your Honor, this is a relay race, and Douglas James was passing the baton to himself. The judge turned to my father. "Mr. James, I asked you this earlier, and you danced around it. Did you call the airline?" My father stood up. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Your Honor, I may have called to inquire. I was worried about her safety. I thought if she was having a breakdown, she shouldn't be flying. It was an act of care. An act of care, the judge repeated, skeptical. You canceled her ticket to care for her? Yes, my father insisted. I didn't want her to be stranded or hurt. Then why? Caleb interrupted, holding up the piece of paper I had obtained from the ticket agent. Does the internal airline note say that you requested the refund be waived and the credit transferred to your personal travel bank? The silence that followed was absolute. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He had been caught in the pettiest, greediest detail of his grand scheme. He hadn't just tried to stop me, he had tried to steal the $300 from my ticket price. That must be a clerical error, my father stammered. Let us move to the police call, the judge said, signaling the bailiff. We have the audio recording provided by the airport authority. Let us hear this act of care in your own words. The bailiff pressed a button on the AV console. My father's voice filled the room, amplified by the high-quality speakers. I am afraid she is going to do something terrible. The recording played. She is unstable. She is heading to a probate hearing today, and she said she is going to make everyone pay. You have to stop her before she gets on that plane. The judge raised his hand to stop the playback. You mentioned the probate hearing, the judge said, looking down at my father. You didn't say she's going to hurt herself. You didn't say she is sick. You contextualized the threat around this specific court case. You weren't warning the police about a bomb. Mr. James, you were weaponizing them to act as your private security to keep a litigant out of the building. My father sank back into his chair. He looked smaller now. The confident patriarch who had ruled our family with fear for 30 years was dissolving under the bright lights of the courtroom. But there is one more thing, Your Honor, Caleb said. The obstruction at the airport was designed to cover up the lie at the heart of this case, the lie about the will itself. Caleb turned to the back of the courtroom. I call Beatrice Miller to the stand. My aunt stood up. She looked like a ghost. She was wearing a gray cardigan that seemed to swallow her whole. She walked to the witness box, avoiding my eyes, avoiding my mother's eyes. She took the oath in a whisper. Ms. Miller, Caleb said gently, you are the sister of the decedent's daughter-in-law. You were present at the house on the night William Ridgewell died. Is that correct? Yes, Beatrice whispered. In his affidavit, Caleb said, holding up a document. Douglas James claims that at 7 o'clock in the evening, he had a lucid conversation with William, during which William expressed a desire to change his will. Douglas claims he was the only one in the room. Is that true? Beatrice looked at my father. My father was staring at her, his eyes wide, a silent, desperate plea for her to hold the line. Ms. Miller, Caleb said, stepping closer. He placed the blue EMS dispatch log on the railing of the witness box. This is the paramedic report from that night. It lists the people present in the house at 7:15 in the evening. It lists the patient. It lists the home health aide. And it lists you. Caleb paused. It does not list Douglas James, Caleb said. In fact, the second log shows Douglas James did not arrive until 8:45 in the evening, by which time the patient was unconscious. Beatrice looked at the document. She saw the truth printed in black and white medical codes. She saw that there was no room left for the lie. Ms. Miller, Judge Vance asked softly, was Douglas James in the room at 7 o'clock? Beatrice closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. No, she said. Her voice was barely a breath, but it shattered the room. I cannot hear you, the judge said. No, Beatrice said, louder this time, sobbing. He wasn't there. He was at a dinner. He didn't come until later. He told me we had to say he was there. He said it was the only way to save the family business. He wrote down what I had to say. My mother put her head in her hands. My father just stared at the table, his jaw working silently. Let the record show, Judge Vance said, his voice cold and final, that the witness has admitted to perjury at the direction of the petitioner. The judge arranged the papers on his bench. He took a pen from his pocket. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked like a man taking out the trash. "Stand up, Mr. James," the judge ordered. My father stood. He swayed slightly. "This court finds that the motion to proceed in absentia was filed in bad faith, based on a manufactured emergency created by the petitioner," the judge ruled. "The motion is denied with prejudice. Furthermore," the judge continued, "based on the testimony regarding the timeline of the decedent's death, the court finds that the so-called oral will described in your affidavit is a fabrication. It is rejected. The original will stands." "But," the judge raised his voice to cut off any objection, "we are not done, because you could not leave well enough alone, Mr. James, because you had to call the police, because you had to cancel that ticket. You have triggered the specific instructions your father left for this exact moment." The judge picked up the letter of instruction. "Pursuant to the terms of the codicil," the judge declared, "I hereby order that the entirety of Douglas James's interest in the Ridgewell Supply Cooperative, and all liquid assets assigned to him under the family trust, be immediately forfeited." "You cannot do that," my father screamed. "That is millions of dollars. It is my birthright." "It was your birthright," the judge corrected. "Now, it is a scholarship. I am ordering the transfer of those assets to the William H. Ridgewell Agricultural Scholarship Fund, effective immediately. You leave this courtroom with nothing but the clothes on your back and the legal fees you owe your attorney." The judge turned to me. "Ms. James," he said, "the remaining portion of the estate, the house, the personal effects, and the residual accounts not tied to the cooperative, passes to you as the sole remaining beneficiary in good standing. Additionally, I am appointing an independent administrator to oversee the transfer of the business assets to the scholarship fund, to ensure your father does not try to loot the company on his way out." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady. "One last thing," the judge said. He looked at the bailiff. "The court cannot ignore the testimony regarding the false police report and the perjury committed here today. I am directing the clerk to forward the transcript of this hearing, along with the audio from the airport authority and the EMS logs, to the district attorney's office for review regarding criminal charges for filing a false report, perjury, and witness tampering." My father collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs gave out. He sat there, a hollow man in an expensive suit, watching his life dismantle itself in real time. "Court is adjourned," Judge Vance said. Bang! The gavel strike was the final period at the end of a very long sentence. Caleb turned to me and extended his hand. "It is over, Isla." I shook his hand. "It is over." I didn't stay to watch my parents argue with their lawyer. I didn't stay to hear my mother's sobbing apologies, or her attempts to manipulate me one last time. I picked up my bag. I picked up the blue folder, and I walked out. I walked down the center aisle of the courtroom, my boots clicking against the wood floor. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the corridor was cool and quiet. I walked out of the building and stood on the concrete steps. Squinting into the bright afternoon sun, I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would want to pump my fist or scream, but I didn't. I just felt light. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack after carrying it for 34 years, the weight of their expectations, their lies, their narrative. It was all gone. I looked at the parking lot. My rental car was waiting. I had a flight to catch later tonight. A real flight, one that wouldn't be canceled. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of a town I no longer had to be afraid of. My father had tried to write the ending of my story. He had tried to write me as a victim, a crazy woman, a failure. But the story wasn't his to write. It never was. It belonged to the truth. It belonged to the paper trail. And most of all, it belonged to me. I walked down the steps, unlocked my car, and drove away, leaving the courthouse, and them in the rearview mirror, shrinking until they were nothing but dust. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Isla's victory. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.